Late in the afternoon at their college canteen, 5 friends were debating their next weekend getaway. Goa had grown entirely too predictable. Seeking a thrill, Mayor suggested a destination located just 2 hours from his village, a place where people refuse to walk comfortably even in broad daylight, Dumas Beach in Surat. Stepping off the auto rickshaw, the group found themselves staring at a shoreline of deep obsidian sand. This photograph captures bright sea foam crashing against completely black rocks. As we look closely at this porous texture, we see a grim historical reality. For centuries, this shore served as a Hindu cremation ground. The soil is literally mixed with human ash. To understand the volume, look at this image of a traditional waterside funeral pyre. Thousands of these fires burned along the Dumas coast over the years. Flesh and bone were repeatedly reduced to a heavy, dark silt, integrating directly into the beach. Mayor knew this history from his own grandmother, who had passed down a chilling local rule. If you are walking along Dumas at night and hear someone call your name, you keep your eyes forward. The moment you turn around into the dark, you permanently belong to whatever is standing directly behind you. Hearing this, the group established a firm boundary. They would go for the adventure, but leave long before sunset. They operated under the assumption that daylight guaranteed their safety. The black sand at Dumas is the physical byproduct of its history. This entire shoreline functions as a massive deposit for centuries of human ash, a reality that tourists often miss while treating the dark terrain as a simple geological curiosity. Take a look at this wide shot of the beach. Notice how thick the crowds are by the water, and then observe how that massive cluster of people abruptly stops. There is an invisible, agreed-upon boundary where the locals simply refuse to walk, leaving an enormous stretch of the coast completely barren. The only person lingering near that empty zone was an exhausted local rag picker collecting plastic bottles. When the group approached him, his warning was blunt. The sand underneath their feet was loose because they were walking directly on top of the sleeping dead. Proving his point, a deteriorating brick structure stood a few hundred yards down the empty shore. Rusted over and half buried in the dark dirt, the metal sign bolted to it read, Dumas Beach Shamshan Bhumi, the authorized cremation zone. The atmosphere around the ruins felt heavy, almost suffocating. 3 of the friends couldn't shake the sudden dread and retreated toward the crowds. But Mayor and Kushal ignored that gut instinct, taking their shoes off and wandering deeper into the isolated stretch. They quickly lost track of time. As the sun dropped below the horizon, the sprawling beach was cast into deep shadow, and their reality warped. The shoreline seemed to stretch on endlessly, their path looped right back to the same dunes, and both of their phones simultaneously died. Environments saturated in dread often behave as spatial traps. They weaponize geographic disorientation, taking a wide-open landscape and folding it into a claustrophobic prison where every direction leads nowhere. Cut off from the rest of the world, the assault began with sound. A soft, clear voice called out Mayor's name over the crashing waves. It was the voice of his grandmother, the exact woman who had warned him never to look back, and who had been dead for 8 years. Before they could even process the voice, the cold ocean air grew thick. A sudden, overwhelming stench of burning flesh and damp charred wood flooded their lungs, hitting them with an intense wave of nausea. Then came the visual terror. A pack of 10 to 12 vicious, barking dogs surrounded them in the dark. Panicked, Mayor threw a handful of wet sand at the closest one, and the moment the dirt made impact, the entire pack vanished into thin air. We can see the scale of historical mourning in this vintage photograph of a crowded procession. Mayor and Kushal found themselves staring at a ghostly echo of this exact scene, a massive crowd approaching them through the dark, carrying burning wood and chanting Ram Nam Satyahe. Terrified, they ran directly into the freezing surf to escape the figures on the beach. But as they looked out into the water, a massive, luminescent entity slowly rose from beneath the churning surface, towering over them and entirely breaking their minds. They collapsed into the surf. A location saturated with centuries of grief can trigger a complete, multi-sensory breakdown in the people who enter it. Every physical sense is targeted simultaneously, from the smell of smoke to the sound of familiar voices calling from the dark. The absolute horror of that night is sharply contrasted by what you see in this daylight photograph. With seagulls circling over a calm shoreline and a modern city skyline, in the background, the beach projects a deceptive normalcy. That morning, the police found Mayor and Kushal exactly where the water met the sand. They were completely unconscious, violently shivering from high fevers. But the most unsettling detail was their physical state. Every inch of their wet bodies was thoroughly coated in the thick black ash of the cremation ground. They physically survived the night, but the ordeal embedded itself in Mayor. Years later, he still wakes up in the middle of the night, screaming, choking on the phantom smell of burning funeral pyres. Tourist destinations often maintain a comfortable facade of recreation. But places like Dumas Beach operate under a different set of rules. The shoreline belongs to the living while the sun is up, but the moment twilight hits, the geography